Hey everybody, thank you again for joining. This is Sam here, and I'm excited to do another video for y'all. I hope you have been enjoying my videos so far, and this one is going to be kind of about the misinformation uh, issue that we're having right now. And I think this topic's going to be a little bit vague, but I want just kind of some room to explore different ideas and whether we cross, cultural, political, ideological or theological even um, boundaries in this discussion, I think will be a fruitful way of looking at these things in a comprehensive view and help to provide a picture of why uh, people are concerned right now, not just crazy right wingers, okay, but also people on the left, people in the center, um, and I just wanted to hopefully provide some insight to what that is, or to why that is. And so I hope that this video will be helpful for anybody. So I want to start out by saying that, I wasn't always, I didn't grow up with the beliefs that I have today. I didn't grow up as a conservative. And if you've watched more of my videos, you might know that. I talk about this a little bit in my videos. But I grew up as a Democrat, and my whole family is Democrat. And my mom was Democrat. I think my dad was a Republican. But you know, even like when Trump first ran for president, I was so viciously against the guy, um, because he said a lot of things that were kind of stupid, right? And he did some things that were stupid. I mean, some people might disagree with that who are really pro Trump, but uh, they might think that he was, he needed to be actively politically incorrect, and that was why so many people didn't like him. But he's made a lot of mistakes, and so that was one of the things. And I kind of bought into the whole Trump is Hitler uh, mentality. And this video is not to really be a discussion on Trump, but I think the Trump phenomenon is very symptomatic of where we are at as a country. The pro-Trump, the anti-Trump. So I think like, first of all, if even mentioning his name without demonizing the guy makes you upset, then that should be a little bit of a red flag, because already it shows that you are not open to new ideas. So that's the first thing. So I was really against Trump, and I remember I was being mentored by a Christian brother who was older and wiser than me, and he was for Trump, and he had mentioned that was the first time where I was like kind of challenged on my hatred of the guy, right? And then also challenged to think about some of the mistakes made by people on the other side of the political spectrum, some of the Democrats, right? And he told me a couple of things that I had never heard about the the Democrats, and I was like, whoa, that was kind of a whole world for me, because those things aren't talked about, right, on the mainstream media. So that's one of the problems that we're facing right now as a country, is that people in general are growing more distrustful of the mainstream media. I did a poll on my Instagram asking people, do you trust the media? And I think there was like, so obviously this isn't a comprehensive survey, but I think there was like 30 people, and all of them voted no. So that just shows that there is a distrust, at least among my friend group, um, of what is being told to us daily. And I'm not saying that to be conspiratorial, but there's a reason behind that. In his book, Intellectuals and Society, Thomas Sowell discusses why that is and where it started. And it's not a new phenomenon. So basically, people used to get their information through various news sources, partisan papers, This was before television, right, and the internet, obviously. And they would weigh different ideas and discuss or decide what they believed, right, and what they really understood to be going on. And I think the American political spectrum is different than than it used to be, when people were able to get all these different partisan newspapers and read and kind of see what they wanted to go with, what the best source of information was. But now is different because now we have most of the media establishment is, in support of the party in power. They are pro Democratic Party, and so most of the information that they're given is going to be anti-conservative, right? Anti-Republican, and even anti-Christian. So, and we see that basically every day. Like, I usually check CNN's YouTube page because I don't actually have TV, so I don't watch the news on TV. I get a lot of my news from YouTube, but I do try to research and do a good job of what I come up with. Basically, I didn't get rid of TV because I was afraid of the news. I got rid of TV because I wanted to save $80 a month. And that was awesome. So I'm glad I saved $80 a month. So anyways, where I'm going with this is that unless you're actively seeking out information, you're going to be told one side of the story. Unless you're actively looking and searching, doing your own research, and I'm not saying I'm like super good at this. I'm sure I do sometimes give misinformation because I'm not perfect in my interpretation, but I'll tell you, the news, the media is also giving misinformation out. So that's the thing with this label, misinformation, which I've been labeled, QAnon, which I don't really know what they are. And I've been labeled Nazi, I've been labeled racist, I've been labeled this and that. The thing is, I haven't called anybody on the other side of the spectrum any of those things. I haven't called them QAnon or Antifa even. Like, hey, you support like riots? Oh, you must be Antifa. No, I don't jump to that conclusion because I believe Antifa to be a radical kind of mild terrorist group. But I don't link people to that because I think the other side of that spectrum is what they see is like QAnon and Proud Boys to be that, that opposite group. And so identifying me with that is a way to kind of like slander me as a potential extremist, misinformation super spreader. And that, that just seems kind of dangerous because if we look at what historically has happened to people who disagree with the party in power, with people who disagree with the predominant ideology, they were oftentimes sent to re-education training programs, and we've even had left-leaning politicians say that they need to send GOP people or people who don't agree with them to re-education training programs. Like AOC actually said this, so that's a big alarm for people. Is like when you start labeling people these things or like labeling them as uneducated. First of all, I have a college education and I did really well in college, so I am college educated. I know how to study. I know how to do research. I'm not stupid, and I'm sure I'm not the smartest person on the planet, but I do know how to do research, and there is a method to my madness. There's a reason why I'm posting videos and posting things on Facebook, and I believe one of those reasons is political and the other one is spiritual. So basically, the political reason is that in a country where the fabric of our society actually rests and relies upon people's vigilance and people telling the truth. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who wrote the Gulag Archipelago, said that if we stop telling the truth, our society is going to fall apart, and he actually saw that in Russia. So basically, like the highest law of our nation calls us to be truth tellers and to stand up for what's right and true. And so when we see things that are not true, we're supposed to call them out. If we see a government that is acting out of the bounds of their political power, we're supposed to call that out as well. Not just if we're in politics or in the media, but just everyday laymen like me and you. And so that's one of the more political reasons. The other reason is not to sway people to my side of the political spectrum, but to help give another side of the story, because maybe I don't see that it's actually being given. People are actually, like, both sides of the story are given an equal opportunity to be told. Because now it seems that anybody who wants to criticize the Biden administration or criticize certain aspects of the ideology that is the motivation for the Biden administration and is the umbrella under which the left operates, if we're going to criticize any aspects of those things, we are labeled as misinformation super spreaders. If we are to talk about COVID almost at all in any other way, if we are to dispute mask mandates, vaccine mandates, or I can't remember what else, or to challenge the CDC, like, those things are all considered misinformation super spreader. But now it's not only just a matter of misinformation, it's also a matter of dangerous misinformation super spreader. So basically what they're doing is they're taking that term, which is very vague, and it was used initially to describe people who may have had the virus but didn't know it, and therefore they were super spreaders because they were unknowingly walking around, presumably without a mask, and spreading their viral load, and everybody was getting sick because of them. So they were dangerous super spreaders, possibly committing manslaughter on a massive level. So you can see how insane that gets when you start using, and maybe people are using these terms nonchalantly or kind of as a joke. That's okay, but what happens is the words that we say and the things that we talk about, Jesus said, from the heart the mouth speaks. Those things actually affect people, and they affect the world around us. If we're calling people uneducated, well, what does that mean? If you're uneducated, you need to get an education. But what does uneducated mean? Uneducated means, presumably now, people who don't go along with the prevailing narrative, right? They're not going along, they're saying different things because they are uneducated misinformation super spreaders. Now, how do people on the right respond to this? Lots of times they try to fight fire with fire, but this is just intensifying the fire, right? This is intensifying the hatred of both sides towards each other. And so I say, like, I don't hate anybody on the left. Now, when I do on social media post something and I get told F you, or you're a Nazi, or you're QAnon, because I consider the label of QAnon to be not a good thing. Like, I consider that not to just be something to be dismissed, but actually as being labeled a potential extremist. I consider that as bullying. I consider that as intellectual bullying. So people who say those things, I will sometimes delete their comments and even unfriend them, not because I hate them. It's not because I hate you and I'm unfriending you for that reason. It's because I don't like being, not that I don't like being challenged. If you're going to challenge my idea, that's one thing. Challenge my idea, but ad hominem attacks are not a challenge to my idea. That is just intellectual bullying and falling in line with this same authoritarian mindset that's kind of building in our culture today. So it's not because, like, I'm intolerant of you that I'm unfriending you. It's because, like, being labeled a terrorist for saying the Biden administration is cracking down on our freedom of speech, and for pointing that out, I'm labeled a terrorist. I don't like that, and so bye. You know, that's the way that's as simple as it goes. So anyways, this is what I wanted this discussion to be about, was about the misinformation super spreader label. But when you're forced to see one side of the story constantly 24/7, in some people that breeds a desire to learn something more. So if you've been watching CNN all day every day, and you're like, wait a minute, there's got to be more stuff going on than Donald Trump's tweets. There's got to be more stuff going on than Ron DeSantis firing back at Joe Biden. Like, so there is more going on all around the world. Yesterday I did a video on Christian persecution and what's happening all around the world with Christians. So just in the category of Christian persecution around the world, it's bigger news, more breaking news than whatever the New York Times or CNN is reporting day by day. And so what these news agencies have become essentially are propaganda platforms for the Democratic Party in order to instill their ideology into people's minds and hearts. And so by doing that, they can more effectively sway people to whatever control they want to give over people, whatever control they want to have. Now that's happening because we're seeing people who are actively becoming mouthpieces for the party. They're saying, okay, everybody, wear your masks. Everybody, wear your masks. And then not only that, but they start to demonize anybody who doesn't want to wear a mask, who doesn't want to walk around like this every day and sound like this because they're muzzled. So, and everybody's saying people who aren't getting vaccinated are actually evil and we want to see them die. I've actually heard people who don't care about unvaccinated people dying. And so I talk to them about it, and I try to talk to them like reasonably, and I just say, hey, like, some of these people have good reasons to be skeptical about the vaccine. And then I tell about my experience with the vaccine, which was scary. And I'm not anti-vax. Like, I think the vaccine has really helped people to beat the virus. And I think that a lot of people who have gotten the virus, because they're vaccinated, they may have died if they didn't have the vaccine. So I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but I do think like the vaccine is pretty experimental. And without that knowledge, like a lot of people know that. A lot of people have researched the vaccine and have seen things. It's kind of like drinking Mountain Dew. When you drink Mountain Dew, it's really good. It tastes good. You want it. But if you really like look at the ingredients label, it's a little scary, right? But sometimes it's not enough to stop you from drinking it. It's kind of like that with the vaccine. The vaccine has some, questionable things that people are concerned about. And so I tell people that. I'm like, well, a lot of these people who don't get the vaccine, they're not just doing it because they're crazy. They're doing it because they're concerned about the vaccine. The vaccine has killed people, right? The vaccine has, I don't know if it's a lot of people, but it doesn't have a perfect track record. Like I almost called 911 when I had the vaccine. So anyways, I'm going to move past that. But basically, like anybody who says anything about the virus is not only a misinformation super spreader, but possibly a dangerous misinformation super spreader. And by labeling people's information that they're sharing on Facebook or wherever else they're sharing that information as a dangerous misinformation super spreader, or potentially a potential extremist, which Facebook has been flagging people for potential extremism. By labeling people as those things, I think the party in power has an effective platform for actually limiting our free speech under the guise of potentially dangerous information. And that's the thing, is once they do it with one thing like COVID misinformation or misinformation concerning the vaccine, then they can start extending it little by little into different areas, like religion. So the Bible may be already considered to be misinformation, but what happens when it's seen as dangerous misinformation, and Christians are seen as who are preaching the gospel, who are standing up for the faith, are seen as misinformation super spreaders? Will they be able to like effectively stop us from preaching the gospel, which in my last video I talked about that suppression is happening all around the world, and so it's not a far stretch to think that it's coming here, especially with the increasing animosity towards Christians and towards Christianity from the general public. So those are some things that I wanted to point out to people, and again, I say these things out of a concern and not. So I think that people on the right or the left should be concerned when the party in power, as well as people who are supporting that system, are effectively threatening our freedom of speech. And I've said before, if people on the left were having their freedom of speech threatened by people on the right, we should be equally concerned about that. So, but what's happening is it's increasing a divide against us. And when we're divided as a people, we're less vigilant because we're more focused on hating each other, hating our neighbors, than we are on actually being vigilant. Like Thomas Jefferson said, we have to be vigilant if we're going to keep this country together, if we're going to keep, everyone together. And I think I would hate to have a monolithic system of thought on the right for everybody to adhere to, that everybody's just a right-winger. We need that political balance. We need that system of checks and balances for our government, but also for our national psyche to keep us in check when we become too far right or too far left. We need that people with other ideas to be challenging our ideas, and that will strengthen us as a nation. But what's happening is not wanting that. What's happening with the ideological superstructure is that it does not want to have us thinking anything outside of what is within the bounds of its construct. And if we do travel out of that bounds, we are either forced to come back in or disconnected. And that's happening not just from the top-down level, but now it's happening in society as well, where people are becoming increasingly alienated from one another for their beliefs. And so, like I said, it's dangerous when you start labeling people things that really have no basis in reality. Me being labeled a potential extremist QAnon supporter for having a different opinion, for criticizing the administration in power for their very real threat to our First Amendment rights. Well, that is a sign of things to come. It's a sign that, we are hated for disagreeing with the party in power, not just by the party in power, but by people who support them. And it's effectively drawing a caricature of us. And if you fit into that caricature, you can be hated. You can be mocked. And if you've watched any of my other videos, you know why this is. This is happening from the Marxist conflict theory, the Marxist engine that's driving the modern party in power. And it's undeniable that Marxism has a hand to play in this division, because Marxism, as we've said, is a system of rebellion. It's a system of looking at other people as enemies and oppressors that need to be overthrown and overcome so that the people who have been oppressed might rise to the top. And that's the image of the fist, right? That's the image of the uprising. And so now these terms like solidarity, social justice, tolerance, political correctness, identity politics, these terms are all being used as a presumably positive force. But if you really start looking at the deeper definition of those terms and probing the surface, they fall apart. And you start to see that they are dangerous to society. When you start to not be able to think things outside of the range of what you've been told to think because it's politically incorrect, that's dangerous for a society. And it's really demonic, not allowing people free range to think and express their ideas. I think that's evil. And so people right, left, and center should recognize that that's happening right now in America, and that people are actually so angry at people that think differently than them that they think they should be re-educated. They should unlearn what they have been taught to learn and relearn things more according to the various theories that have been built into our system through the root of Marxism. We already see it happening. They're wanting to teach our students critical race theory and gender theory, and probably various other theories that are all rooted in the class division, the economic conflict theory that Marx wanted to breed into and infused into his writing, which was a malice. It was a hatred of other people for their differences. And we saw that. And so that's something, if anything should be taught in our schools, it's what that led to in the 20th century. The massive amount of death and the destruction of the world that happened because of this theory, by which all the different regimes were operating, because they were seeing others as oppressors that needed to be overcome. So, if you have a brain that thinks differently, then they would shoot your brain. They would blow your brains out, because your brains were a threat to the well-being of the world. And so by that means, they could actually justify murder, because that murder was contributing to the greater good of of our society. And I think that's what led, I don't say that that's all of what it was, but that's what led to people expressing such evil, like in Nazi Germany. Just normal people like you and me, were able to express such evil because not only were they able to act wickedly, but they were justified in those actions by their party in power. So it started small, and it got worse and worse and bigger as time went on. And so now we're in that phase where as a country, it's starting small within ideology, but it's being pushed farther and farther and farther. People are becoming more and more alienated and less tolerant of one another. And that's leading to the disintegration of our moral fabric as a country, the disintegration of any sort of unity, real unity that we have as a nation. And it's happening as a result of decades of deconstructionist thought, post-secular thought, postmodern thought, and I would say evolutionary theory, and Marxist indoctrination. All those things are contributing to what we're seeing right now in the quest against misinformation and the crackdown on our basic liberties as human beings, and the war against the church. So ask yourself, if you're a Christian, should you be supporting that? Does that make sense? Okay, you might be a liberal, that's great. But can you really support a system of thought that is actively pushing against the God you worship? Well, God bless you, and I hope that this video has been helpful. If it was helpful, please share it, like, subscribe, and take care. Thank you. Bye.